Welcome to the Spike Camp podcast. Spike Camp is a free online community for hunters that support conservation. It's a great place to share stories and your experience with other hunters. As a member of Spike Camp, you get access to all of our hunting live streams, discussion channels, contests, hunter resources, and events that we host. Membership to Spike Camp is free. Our only ask is that you are a member of a hunting or conservation group before you register. Head over to spikecamp.com to join us. This episode of the Spike Camp podcast is brought to you in part by Precision Optics. Omer and his team are the ones to trust when it comes to mountain hunting gear, guns, and optics. Precision Optics is a major supporter of conservation, and we are proud to partner with them. Head over to precisionoptics.net and tell them that Spike Camp sent you.
It is my pleasure to welcome tonight's guest to the Camp Chat live stream podcast. If you have purchased a rifle raffle ticket through the Wild Sheep Society over the years, then you will likely know this man's name. I'm lucky to call him my friend. Before my father passed away, he was buddies with Don as well. And when he introduced me to Don, his exact words were this: "You will not meet a nicer human being than Don Lynum."
Yeah, well,
and I couldn't agree more. Oh, yeah, well, that's very kind.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on here.
That's awesome. Well, before we dive in, maybe you could give us a little background on Don Lynum and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into hunting.
Well, actually, my dad was quite old, so he had hunted, but he was too old to take me hunting at the time. And so a fellow I went commercial fishing with took me hunting for the first time, Gary Oling. And from there, I just kind of took off. So,
how old were you then, Don, when you first started?
16. Yeah, just started at 16. Went and took the 2-week core program at Maple Ridge High School, and so that's one thing about me. I'm born and raised in Maple Ridge, and I still reside here. So, and then anyway, I took the core program. It was a 2-week long course with Lloyd Unraw, and one of the conservation officers, Rick Hahn, was there every night. And then we went to the range twice, and haven't looked back since. Yeah, so
that's a cool program for a high school. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. Yeah, and of course in those days we had a range in Maple Ridge, so we could go there on the weekend and do some shooting with different guns. So yeah, it was a good introduction into hunting for sure. And then I dragged my older brother into it, and ever since then, so then all of us have really gotten into it, mostly the hunting part of it, and myself, I got into the guns a little bit more this last few years, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So what was your first big game animal that you harvested?
I had bought a Parker and Hale 308 from my uncle for $200, and went to Princeton with a friend of mine, and we shot 2 4-points the first time we went deer hunting. And so I shot a 4-point, on the road out to Alder Lake there, and then the next year I shot a moose with that rifle, and then the strap broke and it fell in the ocean one time. I was out fishing and never looked back. So it's in Johnson Straits, that old rifle somewhere. Thankfully, it wasn't a very.
Was that
the Parker?
Was that the Parker Hale?
Oh. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I'll scratch that question off my list of questions, because I was going to ask you if you still had that gun, but
no.
It sleeps with the fishes.
Yeah. It's in a better place. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, and I really took a long time to sort of get a little more serious about hunting. I went at it pretty hard with my older brother. Him and I hunted, and I had one buddy that we hunted in Princeton a lot, and all around Manning Park there on the east side of Manning Park. So we hunted up that way a lot. So and then when our family had a cabin up at Loon Lake just past Cache Creek, so we started hunting around there a lot, and so that's kind of mainly where I hunt up at Loon Lake. So
yeah, lots of
mule
deer hunting.
Yeah, a little bit of elk hunting over in the Kootenays, and so And so those are the kind of, we do family trips every year, and that's pretty much the three places we hunt: Area 8, Area 3, and Area 4. And then we sneak off sheep hunting if we can once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your sheep hunts, you're going with your brother? Is that your main partner
my
for
older
that?
brother. Yeah. So far, anyway, we've done a couple fly-ins. So he's a good guy to go with. He's older than me, but he's a way better shape. So I call him the goat. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's always good to hunt with
guy.
somebody. If you hunt with somebody who's in better shape than you, it's always helpful, especially when you have a lot of shit to get them to carry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He still packs a 10-pound stainless Weatherby rifle, and I can't get him to switch up to a lighter rifle. So
Oh, really? You're kidding?
yeah,
Oh,
he's had it
he's
for
not.
30 years, probably, the rifle, and he won't give it up. No, he's still that's his everyday rifle, and he's 61.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's two, as far as rifles go, I think there's sort of two schools of thought. And, there's, for a lot of hunters, Blake's included, your brother's on that list. They look at the hunting rifle as, a tool to get the job done.
Cool.
Right. So, yeah,
Exactly.
they pick one rifle and they live with that gun and use it forever. And honestly,
That's
you're
all you need.
realistically, but you'd never convince Don Lynum or Chuck Peeling that's all you're going to ever have, right? That just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, that
So,
would be.
but Blake's the same way. Blake's got I got him two rifles. They're both Kimber Hunters. I've got him in a 6.5 Creedmoor for kind of his everyday rifle. He loves it because it's nice and light and he shoots it well. And then it took some coaxing and convincing, but I got him to accept allowing his father to pick him up a 280 Ackley in the same rifle, same platform.
Oh,
So
right
he's
on.
got two identical rifles, and he
that's-
saw the
that's probably-
effectiveness of the 280 on the elk last year. So that was
There you
that
go.
was
Yeah,
good.
that's about as good an all-round hunting cartridge you can get. That or 7 Psalm, or any of those cartridges. The sort of, they're so on recoil, but their performance-wise, they're excellent, right? So
exactly.
Doesn't get much better than a 280 Ackley. So
I totally agree. So for the viewers tonight and any of our podcast listeners, Don and I have a ton of stuff to talk about. And one of the things we're going to be doing here soon on Spike Camp is we're going to start running a live stream series on mountain rifles. And then we'll probably dive off the deep end into hand loading, shooting skills, optics, all that stuff. And I know I was going through my sort of my script and questions for the interview tonight, and I looked at this and went, holy God, I probably got 3 hours worth of stuff. So we're going to get you back on again if we don't cover it all tonight. So
no problem. Anytime.
Anyway. Yeah, and I was telling Blake, I said, I had coffee with Don a couple of weeks ago, and it was 2 hours of gun talk, and it's like, holy shit, we both got to go here. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's
Actually,
interesting.
I met up with Mike Southland yesterday or the day before.
Oh yeah,
yeah, exactly. We got basically, it was gun talk and scope talk, and he finally forgot what we met for. Right, so that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, I had a similar. I had beers with Mr. Southern a couple months ago up at 70 Mile at the pub, and it was the same thing. It's just like, I don't know. It's if you follow any of the threads on Spike Camp, you'll know that Don and I are both self-diagnosed gun addicts. I think that's safe to say. The first step in curing an addiction is admitting that you have one, right? So,
and then just buy some more.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really cure it.
No, you got to feed it though.
You got to feed the addiction. Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
Doesn't seem to be a cure. I know mine's genetically programmed because my father and my uncle were extreme gun nuts too, and I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but I had to liquidate both their estates when they passed away, each of them, and between the two of them, that liquidation was approximately 200 rifles by the time it was said and done. and
Wow.
that really set the hook for me. But let's talk about your addiction. So you were a hunter and you started dabbling when you were 16.
Yeah.
What was your first foray into the custom game?
The first one was a 280 Ackley built on a Husqvarna H5000 Action with a Wildcat
Okay.
stock. Gary Flack
Mm-hmm.
built it. Had a number one 24-inch number one benchmark barrel, and it shot very well and was a dream to carry. Of course, it's long gone, that one, but
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it. Had a bit of with that. It has a bit of a Monte Carlo stock, that Wildcat stock for the Mausers. There's two different ones,
Yeah.
but I like the one with the higher comb. I always
Mm-hmm.
enjoy a Weatherby Monte Carlo style stock. It's always fit me really well, and I'm kind of an oddity in
Mm-hmm.
that respect, I think. But always enjoyed a higher comb and a palm swell. So that's basically the two things I usually get on all my rifles I have built. But Gary's
Mm-hmm.
built dozens of them for me, and yeah, so that anyway, I had that 280, and my son shot a bear with it, and I shot a few deer with it, and we took that sheep hunting, and then actually last year I sold it to a chap in Whitehorse that was a avid sheep hunter.
Oh
So
yeah, well that's cool.
he was an older. He was 72, and he was going on another sheep hunt and looking for a custom rifle. He'd never had a custom rifle built in his life. So anyway, he was pretty happy to get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
anyway,
cool.
so that was the first one I had built, and then I went crazy after that.
Well, it's pretty easy to do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned our buddy Gary Flock, and we'll circle back to him in a little bit here, but I think that's probably the most. I'd say I don't want to say the most well-known gunsmith, but he's certainly one of the most well-known gunsmiths, at least here in British Columbia. And
Yeah.
it should be noted for those that don't know, through the donations that Don puts together time and time again for the Wild Sheep Society of BC. Gary Flock is the guy. Oh, wait a minute. We have a cameo. We got a cameo appearance by somebody. Oh, imagine that. Wow. Mr.
Hey, Kyle,
Stelter,
how's
how
it
you
going, buddy?
doing?
Awesome, Don. Good to see you, all three of you guys. How's it going?
Good, good.
Good to see you, Kyle.
Great
So
to see you guys.
I'd like to say, Don, that this is a complete surprise that Kyle's on here, but I'd be telling you a line of shit if I said that. So we,
glad to have
Kyle
you.
and I were,
Always.
yeah, we were chatting last week. Kyle and I had a little chat, and we thought it would be appropriate to do. We've been planning on getting Don on the Spike Camp live stream for a while now, and we thought it'd be appropriate to get him on a couple days before the big show in Penticton. So Kyle
Perfect.
just drove up to Penticton, right? Just got there. You're in your hotel room now?
Yeah, I just rolled in. So sorry for the poor lighting and the poor mic. And this is not Spike Camp quality, I know, but you'll forgive me.
Oh,
But just when it was a chance to chat with you guys and say hi to Don, I was like, yeah, I'm all for that. So awesome.
Right on. Cool. Well, I'm sure we have a few viewers on tonight watching, but this is going to be released on the podcast platforms in a couple of days here, just in time for the show. But for those that don't know, Don Lynum is a huge supporter of the Wild Sheep Society of BC. And if you've bought a donation rifle, like I mentioned earlier, if you've bought a ticket for a donation rifle in one of the raffles, there's a strong chance that Don Lynum was behind that, in part with Gary Flock and some other guys over the years. So I will let Kyle take it from here, and he can say a few words about this.
Yeah, sorry, Don. I'm going to put you on the spot, but
Worries.
it's we got a pretty crazy community, our conservation community, and the wild sheep specifically, but it kind of is bigger than that. And Don's, that humble, quiet guy that you never hear too much about. He's one of those guys that's always there and wants to support in any way, shape, or form. And it takes a bunch of different forms too. In 2021, we gave Don our sort of our I guess highest respected award with our Lex Ross Award. He was our first president of the society, and Don's just done so much over the years in every way. And my first memory of Don was actually, it was in Kamloops, and we had a raffle, and Dennis Kiddo was one of our photographers, and Dennis is a great guy and just does a ton for conservation, wild sheep, and spreads the word, and just a real humble guy as well. And Don won a rifle, and he's like, oh, I really want Dennis to have this. And so, Don turned around and donated back to Dennis. And I was like, wow, just the generosity of our community. And I think that Don is kind of emblematic of what conservation and our wild sheep community is just this sort of quiet, humble person that really, really cares, and just, does it for the right reasons. It's not about a name or accolade or being, in fact, and I feel guilty because I know Don's sitting there. This is not typical Don style to be sitting there receiving these recognitions, but I can't think of a guy more deserving with, and again, this is emblematic of our community. There's so many great people, but Don's the top of that heap. He's currently our top Monarch member when it comes to our Platinum Monarchs, and just, the Dave Marsh Big Bore rifle series that we've done right from, when we lost Dave, Don stepped up with that donation. Do you know, Don, have you kept the number of rifles you've donated? Keep track of them? How many is that?
No, it's probably around, it's getting close to 20, I would think, anyway. But
yeah,
but in saying that Dave was kind of the one that he approached me and had asked me about donating something. As we were having lunch, we'd get together for lunch every couple of weeks or something. And, I used to live vicariously through Dave's hunting trips. So, but so
as we all did.
Yeah. So I said, well, why don't we donate a rifle? And so of course we argued about what it should be. And I said it should be a Weatherby. He said it should be a Remington. And he wanted a 7M Mod 8. And I wanted a 7mm Weatherby. And anyway, and I said, well, who's going to build it? And he goes, oh, that Gary Flack guy in Langley. Get him to do it. So I called Gary and asked him, and he said, buy Kimber, Montana, and we'll rebarrel it and go from there. So that's what we did. That was the first one. And sadly, David passed away before he got to see the first donation rifle ever made, that he prompted, right? So, and so that's how it became Dave Big Bore Marsh Rifle Raffle. So, and that's one that's usually raffled off every Friday or Saturday night, I believe, at the convention, in which either Kamloops or this year will be Penticton, I guess. And is it going to be the same venue for the raffle this year, Kyle?
Yeah, that's right. We'll be doing it here, and so we pull a raffle license on those rifles, and that's we can sell up to $20,000 worth of tickets on that kind of class of raffle. So Don says 20, and it's got to be close to 20. It might be 18, it might be 22. I don't know. But so if we take an average of that, every single one of those rifles is sold out every single time. And it's because of the people behind it. It's the name, it's the recognition, it's the community. So do the math. 20 rifles at 20 grand, that's $400,000. And we have no skin in the game. It's all Don and Gary. So that's $400,000 in conservation dollars that's going right on the landscape to help wildlife. And so just, again, Don, our gratitude. And I know it's not just us, you look at Spike Camp, look at, who's you take Chuck out for lunch and well, he takes you out for lunch and then you buy, and then of course you throw a rifle in while you're at it. And it's one of Chuck's rifles who, you guys are arguing over that, just the generosity knows no ends. And it's not just that, it just goes beyond that in so many ways. I remember one of our most cool rifles that we had, the very first rifle that we did, that was not a big bore rifle. We did it online, and you won that rifle, and you turned around and gave it right back to us. Just phenomenal.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah. I did win. Yeah,
well,
I actually won a few rifles, and I usually donate them back. But
see, karma has a way of coming back, right? Karma has a way of working its magic, and yeah, exactly. And I think Don gives them back because he's got no room in his safe. That might be part of the reason.
Yeah, but again, getting back to the donation part of it. So, when I approached Gary Flack and I asked him about building it, and and what it was for, and then it became in Dave's memory, and he would never take a penny. He did all his work for free, and donated his time and whatever money that he put into it. So it was very good of him. And too bad this year, he was in the middle of moving, so we didn't have a shop set up. So I had Mitch Kendall build a rifle for this year, so it was in good hands either way. So. But again, getting back to Gary Flack, I can't thank him enough for all the times he's donated rifles that he built, that he had built for the donation. But he always, in his words, he always just says, "I do it for the sheep." So and
exactly.
That's what it's all about. So because they don't really have anybody to speak on their behalf, but the Wild Sheep Society and its members. So that's
very cool.
And yeah, well, that's the one thing about the Wild Sheep Society. When you look at all the different forums and different groups, the Wild Sheep Society is probably, in my mind, is the best run and probably the most dedicated to the conservation part of things in the province, right? If not the country. So we're pretty fortunate, and the amount of people that donate their time. I always say I get the easy part. I have to buy a few parts or drop it off to Gary, and he builds it. Then the fun begins, because I get to go and shoot those donation rifles and make sure they shoot before they get somebody receives it. So that's why I really enjoy doing it. And on top of that, supporting the sheep. So, but anyway, that's how that began, and since then, of course, it's always every year it's in Dave Marsh's memory, right? So he's the one that sort of organized it, and so we got to remember him in some fashion, right, for what he's done.
Yeah,
well, it's funny, Don. You talk about it, again, so humble, and you're like, oh, I just buy some parts, and it's this rifle. Not all our rifles sell out, and the reason it sells out is because of your passion, your drive, your dedication. And it's funny, I had a gentleman call me, and he said, when this rifle comes out every year, he sees Corey on there, Corey Marsh, Dave's Dave's wife, and she, what it means to her and the support, and so again, big part of our community. Corey's still very actively involved. She's in Penticton here this weekend. I know Gary's coming out to the show this weekend. Of course, we've got the Peeling family here, and you guys are going to have a booth. And we're super excited about Spike Camp being at the show. So again, it's just this massive community, and it's interesting. Corey's new husband, he's running for the board this year, and he's been so involved in the Jurassic Classic, and again, not a sheep hunter, but just very dedicated. So just this conservation community is just a huge community. We're so incredibly lucky to have the people we have, and it's the people, Don, like you said, we're a very lucky group, because it's a very dedicated group. And I look at this list of people that are here tonight, the participants, and it's Wild Sheep people and other conservation groups too, but a lot of these are Wild Sheep Society BC members, and very dedicated and very caring.
Well, that was just it. From the first convention I ever went to, Kyle, the guys that are there, like the people you meet. I made some wonderful friends. Dennis Cabana for being one, and Anthony Amantha, and just they're dedicated hunters, right? And it's amazing what you see these guys. Then you run into them when you're out hunting too, and it's like sheep hunters are probably a more dedicated bunch of hunters than any walk of hunting that goes on in the province. So that of course that doesn't hurt when it comes to the conservation side of things, right? They're all very dedicated.
Yeah, I just jump in here for a second, guys. I think the one thing that really comes to mind when I think about the Wild Sheep Society of BC and guys like Don Lynum, and this is one of the main ethos behind Spike Camp was the hunter conservationist model, right? And that's the perfect blend of both worlds, right? You've got someone like Don, who's a hunter, who's giving all this, all his donation rifles to the society, and then you got the society, championing that money into good causes, with all the good people behind it, right? And there's a lot of people that, like you said, Kyle, are not necessarily sheep hunters or even sheep hunters that are
Right.
part of that association. And I think the next step for really making change happen, it's going to come as a bit of a blindside to a few of us here, but this show that's coming up this weekend is becoming an animal in itself. This is going to be like the biggest outdoor hunting conservation show in Western Canada, is sort of where my money's going on this. The trade show's booked solid, right, Kyle? Like, you guys have sold every table now, I think.
Yeah, we're full
crazy.
up on exhibitors, and we're starting to get some really good traction on day passes. This is the week where it'll take off, of course, but so it'll be our biggest show without even the expo, right? So we've got a Friday and a Saturday night banquet, which is as big as we've ever been, because we've got a bigger venue, and then on top of it, we have the expo and the day passes and all that sort of stuff too, which is going to take it to sort of a new level as well. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, and the guest list for the speakers for the like Wild Sheep University and all the seminars and sessions. I mean, shit, I'm almost a little worried that I've got a booth that I probably won't be at it. I'm going to be sitting in sessions for 2 days straight. We're bringing Blake's wife along. She's going to hate us. She's going to hate us because we won't be at the booth at all. Well,
Sadly, I
awesome.
probably won't get up there, so that's I'm a little quite disappointed. But I guess the guy has to work, so that's the downside of work.
Yeah, well, so you got to pay for all those guns somehow, Don. So you got to get up there and steer boats into ports, right? So
yeah, that's right.
Well, yeah, Kyle, sure. I know you're super busy. I just wanted to personally thank you for jumping on and saying hi to our buddy Don and acknowledging him. And we look forward to seeing you this weekend at the show.
Yeah, super stoked. Thanks, gents, for having me on. And again, thanks to Spike Camp. Thanks to Don. You know, when you were sort of envisioning what Spike Camp might be in sort of the early days, and we had some discussions around this, Chuck, and of course, been talking to Blake lots, and his involvement with his horn aging and just the great work that you guys have been doing. But again, an organization that you guys could have taken this and built something, your own platform, and had nothing to do with conservation. And but you guys are, again, like, how can we give back to conservation? This is about the community again. And again, the kind of people I want to be involved in. 2% for Conservation is another example, just an organization like that that's, they want to support the conservation movement, the ethos. And so, it's just a pleasure and an honor to be associated with Spike Camp and you guys, and just the great people like Don that do so much for conservation. We can't do it without you, because without our members, without the support of Spike Camp, the society's members, people like Don and so many others like him, there is no conservation. It doesn't exist, because it's out of the benevolence and kindness and caring for the future of wild animals and wild sheep in our case that this happens. And without this, there's nothing. Without our members, there's absolutely nothing. We have nothing. So thank you.
I wish I could recite the motto. The motto from the Wild Sheep Society. I forget his name, but 100 years from now, when we're all gone, hopefully there's still some sheep for the future generation. Right. So,
well, exactly. Just one last thing, Kyle, before you jump. I know you and I chatted a little bit about it, but we've got a little bit of an announcement that we're going to make here. We don't have all the details worked out, but by virtue of Mr. Lynum's generosity, he touched on a little earlier. He's building a custom rifle right now for Spike Camp to do something with. So we've been talking behind the scenes about, some sort of an initiative to turn this rifle into something good. And right now the concept is we're going to try and do a membership drive for Wild Sheep Society and a couple of our other conservation partners. And I'll be visiting with everybody this weekend at the show to kind of map out how that's going to look. But the idea behind it, again, one of our ethos at Spike Camp is to try to drive awareness and membership towards those groups. And again, Don just randomly offered up, hey, I'll give you guys a rifle, I'll build one, and you guys do something good with it. So we're still spitballing, but that's coming down the pipe here soon. So hopefully it drives more members your way.
Right on.
That's super cool. And again, yeah, amazing, Don. And I guess too, for anyone on tonight and anyone listening to the podcast, it's society's super grateful, and we're always looking to grow and be heard and have a bigger voice for wild sheep. But these other two orgs that you guys really actively support, and I know there's others that you're working towards supporting as well. But I know Wild Sheep Foundation Alberta, I see Darren Epps on here from the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, both organizations that I believe strongly in, great organizations. And I hope through this membership promotion, through John's generosity, that people will think about joining, certainly all three orgs, but if it doesn't happen to be all three, pick any one of them. They're great organizations. They care deeply about wild sheep and wild mountain goats as well, in your case, Darren. So just a great organizations, and does a lot for mountain ungulates, but all other species too, right? So great organizations to be involved with.
Right on. Cool. Awesome, Kyle. I know you got to jump. You got lots to do. You got some work to do to get ready for this big show. So thanks again, and we'll see you in a couple days.
Cheers, boys, and thanks again, Don.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Kyle. Take care.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Don, we want to jump back into the gun talk here, because that's, apart from doing the surprise with Kyle, one of the main things I wanted to get you on here was to talk some guns, custom guns, and sort of dig into a few rabbit holes here. Now, you mentioned a couple times Gary Flock, who's a good buddy of both of ours, and Gary's I wouldn't say he's been a gunsmith his whole life, because he had a whole career before that, but like many gunsmiths, he kind of migrated into the gunsmith world, more or less building guns for himself in the early days, and then turning it into a custom rifle business, if you will, and repairs and all that stuff. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, we're going to jump around a little bit, but choosing a gunsmith, if somebody's going to build a mountain rifle, choosing a gunsmith is kind of like the very first step. What are some of the questions that you suggest our listeners ask their gunsmith when they're contemplating doing a build?
Well, when you're contemplating doing a build, first off, what do you want to do with a gun? Are you just going sheep hunting with it, or is it an everyday hunting rifle? So the two things I always look at is the weight of your scoped rifle, right? And then what are you using it for, right? So, and then generally, we're pretty blessed in British Columbia. We have several good gunsmiths. Andy Vaught from Dragon Mountain Gunsmithing, he's by all accounts, he's supposed to be just an excellent gunsmith. Mitch Kendall, who is, he is a ticketed gunsmith, which I just found out. I through a roundabout way, we found out we were second cousins. Through anyway.
Oh, really?
And I got so I got talking to him, and sure enough, he was actually sent down to Remington by the government, and he got his gunsmithing license, which I didn't know he had one, and he is a certified gunsmith. And then of course Gary, I don't know if there's a more versatile gunsmith around, because he was so good with wood stocks. He would make them right from a blank, and he's such an interesting guy to talk to. He's a lot of experience, and the other thing about Gary, he is so good with picking colors, and matching colors, whether with gun coat and the color of the stock, right? So he has an amazing eye for that kind of thing. But getting back to what they should ask is and that's basically, so then after that, I find the action isn't as big a deal, because it's just a personal preference. Some guys like controlled round feed actions, some guys like push feed, and generally, when you talk to your gunsmith, he's probably going to ask you the same thing. What are you doing with the rifle, right? Is it a truck gun? Are you going sheep hunting? And then of course the end weight, after it's scoped. That's probably the 2 or 3 questions you got to ask and talk to your gunsmith about, right? So and that's where you're going to go with it. To me, the 2 main functions of a rifle is having a good barrel and a stock that fits you, right? So without a good barrel, it's just not going to shoot, right? So that's why I'm kind of, we are blessed again with IBI right in the Lower Mainland. They make great barrels,
Yeah.
and then I'm kind of a fan of Benchmark barrels as well. And
Mm-hmm.
they just make an outstanding barrel. They're one of the best barrels made in the world, without a doubt. And that's
Yeah,
usually what I
exactly.
use. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was just
So
going to say, sorry, Don. I was just going to say a couple of things there, with regards to the gunsmiths. I mean, every gunsmith has a personality, and one of the nice things about Gary is, he's a very open-minded guy when it comes to building a gun. He will build whatever you want, unless there's like something he really, really dislikes about a certain, maybe an action or a stock or something. He'll tell you what his thoughts are on it.
yeah,
But at the end of
yeah,
the day, he'll do whatever what you want. And
yeah, exactly.
he is sort of the he's one of the last of the breed of the traditional gunsmith that will actually hand carve a stock and checker it and do all that. He isn't doing it so much anymore because I think he got rid of his duplicator and all that stuff. But I'm lucky. I've got I got one of these hand carved stocks on my 404 Jeffrey, and it's just an amazing. I'm scared to take that gun out in the bush because I just don't want to put a scratch on it. But
absolutely, I love. There's nothing nicer than a wood stocked rifle, but they're in British Columbia. They're just not practical, right? Because of the humidity level we have, and the terrain we're hunting in. I mean, it's different. If you were just hunting out of a blind or something, and you can take care of it. But me, I hunt with my brother. His gun always looks like he dragged it behind the truck, and mine's not too far behind that. So that's. But getting back to the stocks, Gary was just an amazing. Some of the work that he did is just awesome, right? So, and again, get up to Mitch Kendall too, and one thing about Mitch, he's extremely fussy, and he is an excellent gunsmith, right? And anything he does, when you get your gun, everything works. It feeds and ejects like a dream, and it's very accurate. And so we're, like I say, we're pretty fortunate to have the gunsmiths we do in BC.
Exactly. And gunsmithing's changed over the years. I know when I was growing up, a kid in Saskatchewan in a gun family with my dad and my uncle, custom guns weren't really as much of a thing back then as they are today, right? I mean, most guys out there in the old days, we had, the wood stocked rifles, and that was it. And as time evolved, you started to see guys kind of going down that custom route. And now it's such a common thing to see people building a custom rifle, right? Like a lot of young guys are getting into it and going down this road. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to kind of walk through and have sort of an open chat with you about what goes into building a custom gun. And there's so many things, right? Like the first big one is to choose that gunsmith. And then the questions, some of the questions that come to mind for me is make sure that it's hard for gunsmiths to do this for a lot of reasons, but try to get a lead time on how long you think your build is going to take, right? Like,
exactly. That should be one of the first questions you ask them. So if I drop all the parts off to a build, how long? They might say 5 months, 6 months, and I think it's better when you talk to your gunsmith, say, I need the gun by this date. Can you do it? Because if you don't, if you're not definite on your time frame, then they tend, they get busy, and stuff happens in life and whatnot, and you just never know, right? So so that's probably have a determined date for when you want your build done, and then if they can meet that criteria, well, that would help a lot, right? Then you're not waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for a build. So
and I think that's a really good point, because if you give them the drop dead date on when you need it, then you can pretty well be assured you're going to get it before that. If you don't give them a date, someone else is going to come in and say, hey, I've got a rush job, I need to get this done, or I've got a crack stock. That stuff gets in the way. I think another question, you touched on it briefly, talking about Mitch and Gary both. I think certain gunsmiths will have, I think all gunsmiths, I should say, will have certain components, i.e. action, stocks, and barrels, triggers to a certain extent as well, that they prefer to work with for a number of reasons. And it's pretty, it's pretty important to identify that as well, I think, just to make sure you get, the build you're looking for. Because not only does it have to fit nice, but it also has to feed properly. It has to eject the rounds properly. And, if everything's all lined up perfectly, it's going to shoot well. And that's the whole purpose, right? Is we want to have a sub MOA rifle if we can get it. So,
Well,
you
honestly, if your custom rifle doesn't shoot half MOA, then there's something wrong, right? Because the quality of the barrels nowadays, and if you start out with a custom action, they're basically a Defiance or a Stiller or any of the actions. They're pretty much perfect when you get them, right? So it's a matter of chambering and installing the barrel, and like I said, if you use a good barrel, Benchmark, IBI, Bartlein, any of the better brands, your gun's going to shoot as long as you can do your part when you're pulling the trigger, of course. But
exactly.
Getting to components. So the action, I always say, I've had custom guns built on old Mauser actions, Winchester 70 control round feed action, Remington 700, Seiko A7, any number of actions, but with a good barrel, they all shoot, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, the action is just a personal preference. Like some guys must have a controlled round feed action. Next guy says, "Oh, I want to push feed action," right? And then of course, aside from that, whether you want a floor plate, drop, a detachable box magazine or a blind magazine, so when it gets down to building a custom gun, there's not a lot of components, right? There's an action, there's a barrel, there's a trigger, bottom metal, and a stock. So
exactly.
reality is not it's not much to it, but there is a lot to it because it has to fit you and function, like you say, right? So, but in my mind, the heart of the rifle is the barrel, and then the stock must fit you, right? You have to, when you shoulder it, it has to fit you well, and that's the two main things I always I like about a custom rifle. Not to mention a Defiance action.
I mean, honestly, the Defiance actions really stand out, sort of at the top of the heap for custom builds. You see them more often than not if it's a full custom. And it's important to, I guess, to identify what a full custom is versus a semi-custom, right? A full custom is going to be an action like a Defiance going in, or like you said, or a Stiller or KS Arms or something like that, where it's produced to be built. It's brand new. The other way to go is to obviously take a donor rifle and use an existing, factory produced action, which honestly, in my opinion, there's two ways to go. You can't really beat a titanium custom action as far as, smooth operation and reliability. But on the same hand, I built probably 6 or 7 semi-customs with Tikas, Kimbers, Winchester Model 70s. And if the Smith knows what he's doing, then, that makes a world of difference, because it's just, if it's properly trued and squared and polished up, you're saving what? I mean, realistically, you can buy a Tika donor for $1,000 or less usually.
Yep.
Right. What's a Defiance going for now?
Well, a Defiance, like an XM action, they're about with bottom metal, $2,900 with the BDL bottom metal for a Defiance anti XM action. That's what I paid for the last one. But if, like you said, you can pick up a Kimber Montana for a couple grand and throw a barrel on it, and you're pretty much, that was a nice thing that Gary always sort of promoted a Kimber Montana, because you've got a Kevlar carbon fiber stock, you got an excellent adjustable trigger, you got an all stainless action, throw on a good barrel, and you're away to the races, right? So that a lot of our donation rifles for the big bore raffle at the Wild Sheep Society, we use Kimbers because they're economical and they shot really well. They always feed and inject well, and like the ones I've been using lately, because Kimbers are, almost extinct. I've been using a few Seiko A7s, and that's like I built the 7mm PRC. So Mitch built me one probably the first 7M PRC built in Canada was on a Seiko A7 action and #2 benchmark barrel, and I didn't even change it was just the old rubberized Seiko A7 stock, and the thing shot lights out. It would shoot one whole groups with factory ammunition. So and that gun cost me $2,200 by the time I got it to the range
out the door.
Yeah.
So you have you kept the factory stock on that one, you said?
Yeah. I've since changed it, but I shot it with the factory Seiko A7 rubberized stock, and Mitch he tuned the trigger, chambered, installed the barrel, and away I went. Right. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, I think, like I said, I've had 6 that were built on Tikkas. I still have a couple, and Gary built all of them for me, and he basically just trued them up, squared them, just bed them in. Most of mine were all in Wildcat stocks, which I like.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like their platform.
Canadian
Yeah,
made,
they really
too.
are.
Yeah,
Canadian made, and probably I would suggest they're probably the lightest aftermarket stock out there. I don't know of one that's less. What are they? 19 ounces or something, right?
Yeah, but by the time you get the butt pad on them and painted, they're usually around 22, 23 ounces, right? And so the only one that consistently lighter is a Manners Ultra Carbon Classic, right? They're usually a couple ounces lighter than that out the door. But I will say, the Wildcat stocks are probably, aside from a Gunworks Climber stock, the Wildcat stock is my favorite stock to use on a hunting rifle. They're just an excellent stock, and they're not, 2 weeks to a month wait time to get one, and then you can, you can configure them however you want. You can right hand, left hand. Put a floor plate in, or you can put a blind magazine in them, or you can. The nice thing about it is I always have a bomb swell and a high comb, or put a negative comb on a Wildcat stock now that Gary would do, or Mitch did for the last one for me, and they're just an excellent. I have to say they're probably on par with a Macmillan Edge fill stock, or even I'd say a little better in my opinion, but that's just it's just a personal opinion, right? But any of those, sure. They're the Wildcat stocks are awesome, to say the least.
They are, and for those that don't know, Wildcat's based out of Sherwood Park, Alberta. Stuart, who runs that show, it's a small shop, and they're kind of made to order. And he can set them up. I think he still will paint them for you, right? I think you can get them painted at his end.
Yeah, he'll send, fill, paint, bed, whatever you want with them. Yeah, if you want.
Them, normally what I do is.
You can just get a raw blank. You can have them like this. Or you can get them finished, right? So, there's a Remington 700.
Yeah, they're awesome, and that's the nice thing is if you've got a gunsmith who likes to paint and get creative like Gary does, he can add, like you said, he can add a thumb shelf or a palm swell on it. He can do all kinds of wild paint jobs and stuff. And what I've done the last couple of guns with Gary is I just drop him off and he'll say, "What color do you want?" And I just say, "Surprise me." Like, I don't care. You're so good.
Well, that's
do whatever
kind
you
of what
want
I. Yeah, that's exactly what I got to the point where whatever paint you got going, just because he was very good with his color coordination on rifles, right, between the gun code and the color of the stock. So yeah, for sure,
exactly.
I don't know if there's anybody better at it than him, but Mitch is really good with the colors too. But he doesn't venture out into the amount of colors that Gary used to. So, but
Gary will do whatever you want, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. Yeah, for sure.
So we talked a little bit about barrels. I want to kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit. So back when I was a kid, it was very rare that you would see a hunting rifle, I should say, with a custom barrel on it. Most of the custom barrel makers, at least in Western Canada back in the day, were making barrels for competitions, if they were making them at all. They usually were a silhouette shooter, or in today's world, a PRS or F-class shooter. and their barrels were ridiculous, heavy and long,
Heavy.
28, 30
Yeah.
inches. And
Yeah.
now with over the last probably 10 plus years with the advent of custom rifles, you've seen these barrel makers come out of the woodwork, or barrel makers adapt. And you mentioned International Barrels in Chilliwack with Ryan Stacy at the helm there. Their barrels are outstanding, in my opinion. I've had 10 or more. I know you've had probably that, if not a lot more. What's really intriguing with them is, they'll pretty much do whatever you want as well. So you can custom order your length. You can order to a certain degree. You've got flexibility on the profile if it's depending on the caliber. They started doing the Mountain Light, Gary Flock Mountain Light stainless barrel fluted a few
Right.
years back,
Yeah.
and then the carbon wrap barrels in the Mountain Light as well now. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain on barrels, because you've been doing it so long. You were building guns, and then all of a sudden, bam, carbon barrels started showing up. What's your opinion, honest opinion, on pros and cons on carbon wrap barrels versus your standard stainless barrels?
Well, I find from my experience the carbon wrap or carbon fiber wrap barrels are probably a little more. I think because they're stiffer for the diameter, like the size of them, it takes some of the harmonics out of the barrel, and they are consistently more accurate than a steel barrel. I find, because generally when you're using a steel barrel, you're using, for myself, I'm either using a number 1 contour, and when I refer to 1 or 2 or number 3 contour, I always use benchmark as sort of a guideline for contours, because they have the most stages of contours in barrels that available. They have some light barrels that other barrel makers won't even make. So, I've had lots of number 1 fluted barrels, where some guys won't even make a number 1 contour barrel, let alone fluted, right? So,
yeah.
But
Yeah, I
like you
have.
said,
I was just going to say, I have a little Remington titanium with a benchmark number 1 fluted in 6.5 Creedmoor, and that is pencil thin. I know Ryan and the guys at IBI, there's no way they would make one that that thin. It's it's super light, but just like deadly accurate. But yeah, so I think what Benchmark has like 7 contours. I think 7 or 8, something like that.
7 or 8,
they offer.
and for in general purpose sort of hunting barrel contours, right? For sure. And they start at 1, and then 2, 3, and I think if you look at Bartlean, they start at 2B, and then they go to 3B. So they've got they basically start at a number. It's about halfway between a 2 and a 3, and same with IBI. It's sort of their latest contour is right between a 2 and a 3 benchmark. So if you want a light barrel, you pretty much got to go to benchmark rifle barrels. They're one of the few makers that make, and on top of that, they make excellent barrels. So it's you're not going to be short yourself.
Exactly.
The only drawback is they are expensive, and more so even than a IBI barrel, of course. But
by the time you get exchange and shipping and whatnot on them, all that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Because they're coming to the States, of course.
So you mentioned that you find the carbon wraps to be a little more accurate. Do you find any issues?
I wouldn't
with
say more accurate.
pressure?
I'm just going to say consistently accurate, right? They seem to be more forgiving when it comes to accuracy, right? So,
right.
But not that they can shoot any better than a steel barrel. It's just that I just find them a little more forgiving, probably. As far as accuracy.
So you're able to get to your accuracy level that you want a little quicker, maybe when you're low developing,
it seems,
right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for sure. They're good. The first one I ever used was a Hell's Canyon, which is a benchmark liner, and I bought a number 2 barrel from a guy out of the States, and Gary built a 300 PRC for me on a Kimber, Montana, and that barrel was a 1 in 9.5 twist, and didn't matter what factory ammo or hand loads I shot through it. It shot everything like either half inch or smaller. It was just crazy accurate. My nephew still has that. I sold it to my nephew, and he still hunts with it. So yeah, so Hell's Canyon. There's a few nowadays. A Benchmark has gone to all cut rifle barrels for their carbon fiber wrap barrels, and I believe IBI is as well. Correct?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and then of course Bartlene has been cut rifle barrels all along. They never had button rifled, and their barrels are excellent as well, right? And then of course proof research barrels. I mean, I've had proof, Bartlene, IBI, and Benchmark carbon fiber barrels, and I've never had one that hasn't shot. Right? They've all been excellent, right? I don't know if go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've had a few. I think I've had 4 or 5 now, customs that were carbon wraps, and I had an interesting observation, if you will. So the first, I think the first Tika and 6.5 PRC that I built, I had an IBI 20-inch barrel, stainless steel, the Mountain Light version, the Gary GEF Mountain Light, and that thing lights out, just easy to get to my load. I could go right up to max pressure, and yeah, it was a lights out shooter. Then the second one I built, basically exact same setup, only I used a carbon wrap barrel from IBI 20-inch. Also very deadly accurate, but what I found with that one is the carbon wrap barrel, and maybe it was just this one, using the same load data, same bullet, same powders, everything, same brass, different like brass, not fired from the first rifle and the second one, but same brand of brass. I hit a pressure wall really quick with that carbon wrap barrel, like 2 grains below where I was, or 1.5 grains of powder below where I was with the other one. Have you ever ran into that before with the carbons?
The only thing I noticed, well, of course, the first few ones I used were Hell's Canyons because they were basically the only ones other than proofs. But I found them to be a little bit slower than a steel barrel. I don't know if it's just coincidence or what the case is, but the first few I built were like 26-inch 300 PRC, 26-inch barrels, and they wouldn't they wouldn't even get the factory ammo speeds, right? So, but they're accurate, as all get up. I remember when, of course, Gary had built the first few for me, and we were out at his cabin, and we're shooting at 860 yards, and I was shooting factory Hornady 225 grain ELDM match ammo, and I shot 3 shots at 860 yards into about a 3.5 to 4 inch group, and Gary was looking through the spotting scope, and he says, "Holy man!" He says, "I got to have one of those, right?" So, and that's the nice thing about factory ammo nowadays. We're pretty blessed with all the excellent ammunition, and not to mention barrels, of course. But I found overall, I think the carbon fiber barrels are slightly slower from my experience, anyway. And nowadays everybody's going short anyway. That's the thing with everybody's using a dial-up scope, and so whether you're 22 or 24 or 26-inch barrel, I don't, it's kind of almost, I shouldn't say irrelevant, but the turret or dial-up scopes kind of evens the playing field as far as take some of the worry about velocity out of it nowadays, right?
Exactly.
Whether you're running 20, if you're running 2850 feet per second or 2950 feet per second out of a 7 PRC or a 300 PRC, it's just not that big a deal. It's just a couple more clicks MOA on the dial, and you're on target anyway. So, right. So
yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I know I'm just doing as you know, I bought a Gunworks climber from Omer shop, Precision Optics, chambered in 300 PRC, and that's a 20-inch barrel, which a lot of people would say that's pretty aggressive for a Magnum of that caliber to be in a 20-inch and a 300 PRC. And I will say this, that rifle is it's not recoil that you notice with that rifle. It's just very lively, especially off sandbags at the range. You get muzzle jump, and it's a pretty lively gun. But the point is, someone asked me the other day, they're like, why did you go to a 300 PRC and then chop it to 20 inches? And I was like, well, for one, I built this rifle I bought this rifle for a purpose use, and that's to carry as my main sheep rifle in grizzly country. And we're going to do a podcast. Yeah, Blake and I are going to do a podcast at some point on grizzly encounters, because we've had a few, and I know lots of guys have. And for me, Blake's carrying a 6.5 Creedmoor on his sheep hunts, and I'm carrying a 300 PRC, and I just want to have a little more oomph behind, more than anything. That's the reason. Will it kill the sheep? Heck yeah. Will a 6.5 Creedmoor kill a sheep? Yes, it will, quite effectively. So for me, what I look for nowadays, and this has changed, like you said, I'm looking for a lot of criteria in a mountain rifle. So for me, I'm 5'9". When I carry a rifle, I carry it on a Kifaru gun bearer on my hip belt.
On your pack.
So on my pack, and I want to have I want to be able to see over the barrel when I'm navigating through the bush, because the gun is like right where my hand is. It's kind of riding right here. So I wanted that gun to be like that. And if I have it strapped on my shoulder on a sling or strapped to the pack, I didn't want it to be taller than my head. So I went with 20 inches, and I've had 5 or 6 guns in 20. So, okay, what's the next step for me? Well, I want to have a bullet that's going to do damage and kill on impact. My bullet of choice is a Nosler Accubon. That's what I've hunted with for my entire life. When I look at exactly, and it's hard to argue with a Nosler. The other thing I'm looking for now more than anything is, what's my effective range as a hunter? And in my world, if it's inside 600 yards, I'm comfortable. And with the right conditions, I'll make that shot. If it's super windy and I don't have a good rest, I'm not going to. So the last thing I look for in criteria on that rifle is impact velocity, where that bullet will be effective. So in the case of the Accubon, 16, 17, 1800 feet a second. I think 1800 is their recommended. So I'm looking for, at 600 yards, which is my effective range, I want to have 1800 feet per second with a 200 grain bullet. And so that's, like you said, and that's only possible now because of ballistic apps and dial-up turrets. In the old days, guys were looking more so at foot-pounds, right?
Well, that's why we went to a Weatherby cart. Like, we started shooting 300 Weatherby, because we could get 3,200 feet per second out of a 180 grain TT or TSX in those days, or Barnes X, actually, when we first started shooting them. And you sight in for 3 inches high at 100 yards. You're only about 4 or 5 inches low at 300, right? So, or at 400. So, it was a very flat shooting rifle out to about 400 yards. After that, well, because we didn't have dial-up scopes, right? So we used to hunt the Alpine in a couple of spots, and we would mark. We would drag log out, and we would mark every 100 yards, and we'd know when we shoot through a basin how far we were shooting. But now, like you said, with dial-up scopes, it's no issue at all. You just a couple of more clicks, MOA clicks, and away you go.
Exactly. And the scopes.
Getting back to the 300 PRC, well, any of the PRC cartridges, I think they're just amazing cartridges. Not that there isn't other great cartridges, but I'm really very fond of 6.5, 7 PRC and the 300 PRC, and I really like the 190 grain CX ammo offering from Hornady in my 300 PRC. It shot very accurately, and it's almost 3,000 feet per second out of a 190 grain solid copper bullet. So it's cooking along pretty good. So, that's another option to look at. Aside from, like you mentioned, the Accubon, and that's the other bullet that I hunt. Basically, it's all I ever use for deer hunting is a 160 grain Accubon or a 140 grain Accubon in my 280 Ackley. And
Yeah.
every shot is just flattened it, and with one shot, which is and same with my son. The last Barry shot at Spence's Bridge with 140 grain AccuBond out of a 280 Ackley, it dropped it. So it's they're excellent hunting bullets. For the of all the bonded bullets, I don't think there's a better bullet than an AccuBond. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big proponent of that. What's your thoughts on the new all the new copper jacketed bullets that are out there? I mean, you've got like the Hammer Hunters and all these ones. But have you played around with many of those?
None of the Hammer Hunters. The CX bullet, I haven't shot anything with them, but they're all the copper, solid copper bullets. They work. There's just no, I'll tell you where they work best is elk hunting, right? Like if you're gonna hunt elk in BC, they're a big, tough animal, and my experience is that if you shoot a solid, I don't know how many elk we shot, maybe a dozen, and every time we shoot them with a solid copper bullet, we're usually picking the bullet up on the inside of the offside hide, or it goes through and through. It'll break both shoulders, and they die, right? But there's, they're just a tough animal, and those bullets are a perfect combination for, hunting elk for sure. Yeah, they're
and they
there's
are
many.
definitely.
There's lots of them. There's the Hornady CX, there's a new one, Barnes TTSX, TSX, LRX. I've been trying to get those to shoot my new 6.5 PRC. Any of those solid copper bullets are good. The Hammer Hunter bullets, I tried to. Are they selling them in Canada yet? Because I tried getting some of them, and they wouldn't sell them to me out of the States. So.
Yeah, I've ordered them direct from Hammer, but it's been a couple of years. When was the last time you tried? Was it a while ago?
It's about 4 years ago. And they wouldn't sell them to me, so.
You can now.
Anyway,
I'm pretty sure you can get them here now.
But-
Yeah, in fact, I know you can, because I know a few other guys that are bringing them in. I've only played around with them a little bit, and one of the things I found with the Hammers, very easy to develop an accurate load with. Like, they're very user friendly. I was doing ladder testing with my 6.5 PRC, and I cannot remember. I think it was 124 grain Hammer Hunters, and I mean, I literally went through, I think it was a grain and a half extremes from one end to the other on my ladder test, and it was like I think 4/10 of a grain initially was what I was stepping up to. And I walked out to the target, and I took a look at it, and it was a 3/4 inch ragged hole with 10 shots, and it was literally a grain and a half of powder difference, and it was still. And the velocities, my chronograph wasn't working very well. I had a lab radar back then, and I was just getting, I missed like 4 shots, but at the end of the day, I still had very consistent velocity. So I think there's a lot to be said with the quality of those bullets as far as the machining goes, and maybe they're not big now. But
I see Weatherby's actually loading them in their factory ammo now. So they're pretty popular stateside from what everything I've read on them anyway.
Yeah, and I think Gunworks as well. I think Gunworks factory ammo. Not that anyone on this show can afford Gunworks factory ammo, but not even you, Don. I don't think $250 a box.
I will say Mike Southland was kind enough to let me shoot one of his Gunworks guns, and I will say they are a nice rifle for sure. And they don't, they do make nice components. I've actually got a couple of their stocks, and they're pretty nice. So
they are. Yeah, I was a holdout. I've been wanting to try one for a long time, and just chatting with Omer back and forth, he kept telling me, you got to try this, you got to try this. So I did a bit of a fire sale on a bunch of guns back in November and picked one up, and I'm impressed. I think the only criticism I have, and it's not even a criticism, it's probably more me than anything, is I find the grip on the climber when it, and this is from my understanding, I don't know anyone else that's ever had this happen, but mine's a 300 PRC. Like I said earlier, we're talking the 7-pound gun, 20-inch barrel. When I fire my shot, the trigger guard smacks my middle finger, and that's the one criticism that I would have, at least the one thing that bugs me. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So if you can have a look at it where your hand holds, you're absolutely right, because if there's a criticism on this sock, it's that your fingers are too close to the trigger guard, right?
Yeah.
It's, as much as it has a bit of a traditional, it's sort of a midway or a compromise for a traditional grip to a vertical grip, right? So, and you're right. Even on this gun, this is 8 pounds 1 ounce, and this is a 6.5 PRCW, and when the powder charge gets up a bit, I have to hold the rifle in tight to my shoulder. Otherwise, the trigger guard does, it will touch my fingers. So you're right. So I can see with a 300 PRC, a bit more recoil and a 20-inch. So would you say 8-pound rifle? Yeah. So
7.5. I think I'm in all in right now.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's so many good things about that stock. Like the one thing I like about it is if you look at the placement options for your thumb, there's 3 positions, right? I don't know if you can show it on your camera,
but I don't think there's a more comfortable stock design to shoot with, right? They are amazing, but they're of course they're awful expensive. That's the downside to them. But they are a nice stock.
That's the world we live in.
Actually, yeah. Well, the whatchamacallit, the Fierce Rogue stock is sort of a takeoff of that climber stock, and it's a nice. I'm waiting. Mitch is going to build a couple of guns, or Gary, whoever I can get to do it. But I've got 2 actions sitting here. I'm just waiting for one more barrel to drop off, and they're going to build a couple of 7 PRCs on those Fierce Rogue stocks. So we'll see how they are. Yeah.
I didn't know you could get those stocks individually. You get that through Omer?
Yeah, I ordered them through Omer, but they haven't shown up yet. I did buy one. I bought one on Gun Post. A fella had a brand new Rogue stock, and it was a takeoff of somebody else, and I picked it up at a real good, for $500 shipped. So it was.
It's a good deal.
Not a bad price at all. So, whereas these things are, with bottom metal, they're $2,100 for the stock, right? So they're not cheap, right?
Oh, exactly.
Here's
such a rabbit
action,
hole.
actually, now that we're talking about actions, this is a pure precision skeleton action on this, and it's very similar to a Defiance Anti. The only benefit to this or difference, I guess, is it has a 75-degree bolt throw, so it tends to clear the scopes better than the Defiance. But it's almost identical to action. It's got the M16 extractor on it, and it's lightened in all the same places, so it's a real nice action for sure.
Yeah. And is that out of the States, Don?
Yeah, pure precision. Yeah, they're just I believe they're in Montana. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or
they're
in Colorado.
Yeah. In Colorado.
Yeah.
What's the price comparison on that action versus a Defiance? By the time it gets here,
they'd be about $400 or $500 cheaper than a Defiance. Yeah, the skeleton for sure. Well, mind you, I ordered this one. This is a short action, of course. I got this. It was $9.29 US on the Black Friday sale, and now I see they're at $12.99 US. So by the time you pay the exchange and import-export fees, right, and duty or not duty, but just the taxes on it, of course, I think they were. We got them up here for $1,600. So which was
now. Is there any issues? I've never done this. I've never bought an action only out of the States and brought it up. Is there any, do you have any issues in clearing customs with actions? Are they considered like
all gun parts, you just send them through import, like you can either use clay at Prophet River or I used iRun guns for those ones. And amazingly enough, I had ordered 2 actions, one for Mitch and myself, and I had them at the house here in 3 weeks.
That's quick.
Yes, very quick. I guess it's just timing wise. They happened to get on the right bus and the right shipment, and they were, so it all worked out pretty good. So they were, like I say, $1,650 shipped through iRun Guns, one of the import export guys.
Yeah, those guys are good. Hopefully, our government keeps their hands out of the rules and regulations on that and allows us to keep doing this. But it always worries me about this.
Yeah, well,
But
that's yeah, we worry about it, but a lot of times that kind of stuff's out of our control. So
exactly.
which is frustrating, of course, but that's the world we live in nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. What's your position on triggers? What's your favorite trigger for a custom?
Well, Trigger Tech triggers are. I like Trigger Tech special triggers. They just have a
Mm-hmm.
little bit better spring than the primary, so they're as nice a trigger as you can get, really. And the nice thing about them is
Mm-hmm.
they're sealed. One trigger I do like is a Timney Calvin Elite, but they, they're not sealed as well as these ones, so you have to be careful with getting a little bit of debris in them, or I know my nephew, he went through a mud puddle on his bike and soaked the rifle. While we had a heck of a time. The trigger locked up on him, so we figured out that it was after doing some research. They weren't sealed quite like the Trigger Tech triggers, so pretty hard to beat the Trigger Tech. And then on top of that, they're Canadian made too, so
Yeah,
they're
it's
as good
pretty
a
interesting, right? I mean, you can almost buy. You can build a full custom rifle exclusively with Canadian parts if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah, you can. Oh, for sure. I had a KS Arms rifle built, and it was in a 7mm PRC. I put a Wildcat stock on it, so other than the Zeiss scope I had on it, it was pretty much and tallies. The whole thing was Canadian made. Yeah, so which was kind of cool. Yeah, we need some more. We need a couple of more. Well, there's that new fella. He's going to be at the sheep convention in Penticton there, Alpine
Riflecraft.
Alpine Riflecraft. Yeah, and I see he's
Yeah.
using Wildcat stocks on his rifles. I was just looking at it today online. It's a nice looking rifle, actually. Yeah, he's got he's got a neat looking brake too, a side port brake on, and it matches the contour of the barrel. Look, really smart looking rifle for sure. And that's another thing.
Yeah,
I'd like to go. I'd like to be there to see that. Right. So.
Well, maybe we'll get Blake to buy one. He can open his wallet and bring it back. What do you think, Blake?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. We've got to test them. Well, that's the one nice thing about building rifles, or even all the donation rifles, right? It's a lot of fun shooting them, and not too often I develop hand loads in the donation rifles, but it's nice that they usually shoot factory ammo really well. They always shoot something quite well, so which is lots of fun. So I think the big bore rifle, this last one I just sent, it's a 7 PRC built in Kimber, Montana, 8400, and it shot all the factory ammos really well, which was pretty rare. Usually it likes of the Hornady ammo, it'll usually like either the ELDM or the ELDX, but not both. Whereas that rifle, and it shot the Hornady CX ammo as well, so it shot all three quite well. So that was an IBI barrel on there. So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, one of the things we'll circle back to calibers, but I think back to criteria on building a custom rifle, and again, some of the things I look for, and I'm sure you do too. I know one thing I love about what you do, Don, is when there's something new coming down the pipe with a new cartridge or new caliber. It always seems you're Johnny on the spot. You're the first guy to have one, and Gary will say the same thing. Usually Don orders the reamer and then 10 other guns are built right after it with that same reamer.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting because, part of my criteria for a custom build, especially in the last 5 years, has been, what's the availability of the components I'm going to need for that gun, i.e. brass, dies. Bullets are always a problem, but I mean, that's more of a generic caliber by caliber problem. But yeah, I mean, let's face it, right? It's been really tough. Like, I have a custom 7 SOM that is probably my all around favorite rifle, and my nephew had an interest in it, and he was asking me about it, and I was like, yeah, I'd sell you this gun, but you're not a hand loader, and that means either I got to load for life for you, or
Or
You
I
got to
gotta
find
teach you how to
factory ammo, or I got
Yeah.
to teach you how to hand load. But I mean, good luck trying to go out and buy 7 SAUM factory ammo today, unless you're buying Gunworks, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
stuff like that is a consideration, right?
No, for sure. And initially when I started building custom rifles, that was one thing. I wouldn't build one that I couldn't buy factory ammo for. That was my
Mhm.
but of course that's gone by the wayside now too, right? But initially because I thought, well, if I gotta sell it or if I want to sell it, it's always better that you use a gun or a chambering that has lots of factory ammo available, right? So and
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
the resale value then is, or it's a little easier to sell, right, for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. Because I
Yeah,
mean, if like I cautioned my nephew, I was like, no, I don't think this gun's for you. And then part of me selfishly was, I never want to sell this gun anyway, so I'm gonna.
exactly.
This is one of the
Yeah,
keepers.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like this gun. It's like I say, I have to run 6.5 PRC ammo or brass through a you know a through a
7.
yeah, in the set. Well, mind you, I got dies now, but I was just using a mandrel, 7mm mandrel, to
Okay.
connect on the brass and but so I never would have done that in the past, where because it didn't have factory ammo.
Mhm.
But now it kind of, once you get moving along in the hand loading world, it's not a big deal really. It's just necking the brass up and away you go. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
That brings up another question. I wanted to ask you, when you went down started this journey to the gun world. How long did you go before you got into hand loading?
Oh, that's a good question. Not long after I started building custom rifles, because
Hmm.
once Remington Jim and Jim Dunbar and Gary, of
Hmm.
course, and then the other guy that helped me a lot is Mark from Nechako. I mean, he's helped
Yeah.
pretty much everybody in the province first. He's like the
Yep.
hand loading genius, that guy. And then
Hmm.
Colin Kalinske. So yeah, probably it was a couple years after I started building rifles, I got into it, dabbled in it, and then
Hmm.
in probably the last 5 years, I've really gotten in, taken a serious venture into hand loading, of course. So, well, when you build so many, I built a lot of rifles in the same chambering, like 280 Ackley's, 7 SAUM, 6.5 PRC, uh, now 7 PRC, 300 PRC. Um, you after you hand load for those, that cartridge enough, and after a while you pretty well know it works, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
what powders work, and it's not rocket science once you've done it a bit. It's pretty it does get easier or simpler, if you will, as you go along for hand loading.
Exactly. And it's hand loading's evolved so much over the years, and I've written a couple of little articles on Spike Camp about this. I go back. My dad was a hand loader and competitive shooter back in the day, and I remember just being a little kid prepping brass, sitting in the loading room with the old man for the evening, and it was slave labor. He got me to do all the shitty stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
grinding out the primer pockets, and I think I was probably 2 years of brass prep before he let me touch the handle on a press. But at
yeah.
the
There
end
you
of the
go.
day, yeah, exactly. And you knew my dad, so you knew how fussy he was with his hand loads. But it's really changed, right? I mean, in those days, at least in his case, it was neck sizing, and we didn't have all the fancy tools and stuff. And he would seat bullets out till they kissed the lands, and then he would back them down a couple thou, and
Way,
shoot for accuracy. Never had a chronograph till he was like 60 years old, and he was winning competitions in F class. Beating $2,000 gun with a Bushnell scope, and he's beating $10,000 guns next to him. But yeah, it's really a game changer if you can open up your horizons and learn how to hand load. It's
yeah.
a bit of
And
a overwhelming thing, but yeah.
getting into hand loading, it's funny you say it, the changes, just even in the last 5 years, the changes in hand loading and, components. Once we got through this pandemic, we're starting to see powder showing up again and the odd bit of primers
Mhm.
here and there. So, which is nice to see finally. But like
Yep.
you said, you almost had to be careful about what cartridge you're going to load, or if you could get components for it. That's the other thing. So, but we're pretty
Yeah,
fortunate
lucky it's
now.
coming back.
Yeah, with the the equipment that's coming out, and you take guys like that Eric Cortina, and that
Mhm.
who's that other guy that there's a few of those guys in the States that
F class
John.
John.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's good.
I chat with him once in a while online, and he's very informative, and yeah,
Mhm.
those guys, they've brought a lot of handling to light for sure online, without a doubt.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
another guy, Sam, can't remember his last name,
Sam
Panhandle
Millard.
Precision.
Yeah,
Sam Millard. Yeah.
actually, when I started, it's funny you say that, because when I started hand loading, I was kind of scared to ask for help from certain guys, and so I just watch videos. I watched some Gunworks, Aaron Davidson, and then Sam Millard. Basically, that's who taught me how to hand load with online
Yep.
video. And he was very detail oriented right from start to finish. I don't think there's better online instructional videos for hand loading than Sam Millard and Panhandle Precision. And he's kind of a no nonsense guy too, which is the way
Really
he
is.
works.
Yep.
Yeah. He is good that way. And then if I had other questions or I'd run into other issues, well, I could always call Gary the gunsmith or Jim Dunbar,
Mhm.
right? Those guys, Jim's another ardent hand loader. He's probably
Yep.
he's been hand loading since he was 10 years old. So, 50, 60 years of it. He's pretty good at it. It's like your dad, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, actually, I still have a can of Reloader 33 that your dad gave me that I
Okay.
use in my 300 PRCs. Yeah. So,
Nice.
yeah. I still have some of it left. And it's excellent powder, and with heavier bullets. I was using it for 245 Elite Hunters and the 300 PRC, and yeah, it
That's a
was
heavy bullet.
yeah, for sure, and excellent powder. But yeah, Kevin, he got, well. Your dad too. He was another guy who could ask questions on hand loading, right? So whenever I went over there for have a cup of tea with him and your mom, and he would set me straight on what to use, and like I say, I left his place with a few cans of powder. So yeah, he was a
Yeah.
good guy.
As did I. Trust me. It was.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he had lots of it. Holy mackerel.
Oh
He had
my
lots of
God.
stuff.
Yeah. That shop he had behind his house was just a zoo. When we went to clean, Blake shaking his head because he went in there with me. But when dad passed away, it was like the day before he died. He told me, he's like, one of the things he said to me was, he says, "You're gonna have to spend some serious time in my shop, because over the last 2 years I've forgotten where half my shit's hidden." And he said, "Just be careful when you're opening boxes and looking around." And he wasn't wrong. I had a few surprises, which I won't talk about on air here, but that the old school hand loader, if there's another buddy of ours, Ed Thompson. I think he's cut from that same cloth. He's a younger version of one of those old school guys. He's younger than us, but Ed, he still uses the beam scale, and he's got his grandfather's loading gear and stuff. And I just love watching his stuff on Instagram. He's a classic guy, and he does it the old school way, and it works, right? Like, if my dad walked into my loading room today and he saw a Henderson case trimmer, the auto trickler,
From
and
McDonald,
and then the zero press, the first thing he would say he'd ask me, go, "What'd you pay for that?" And
exactly.
if I told him what I paid for it, he would just shake his head and be like, "Why do you need that shit? You can get it done with a rock chucker and a beam scale, right?" So
yeah, well,
anyway.
it's funny you say that. So I bought a reloading kit from Market to Chaco Sports, the Redding reloading kit, and of course I still use the Redding press I use it for taking bullets out of cases that whether I've
Pulling them. Yeah.
ones that pulling bullets, right? So, and then I have the what's that other pressing out there? But anyway, and I still have the Redding tool, and for trimming like your brass.
Yeah.
And and I keep it in the same plastic container it came in. And I was kind of laughing about it this morning because I was doing a bunch of hand loading this morning, and I always think about Mark whenever I, because I've had it probably for 15 years, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Coming a kit, and I still use it. So, that's
Yeah, it works.
yeah, it works.
Well, and it's funny because you mentioned Sam Millard and YouTube, and we did a podcast a week ago with Brandon Roth, one of our members, and we were talking about adult onset hunters. There's a lot of them, right? Guys are getting into hunting in their 20s or 30s, and
yeah,
it's overwhelming to a certain degree for these younger guys to learn the craft, right? To get out in the bush and learn, and without people sharing their knowledge, it's very difficult. The barrier of entry is more challenging for new hunters. And I would suggest hand loading. You think about the consequences of a mistake when you're hand loading, right? 4 grains of powder can blow your desk up in your face with it, right? I mean, it's very easy in some of these. Like, depends on the cartridge, right? Like I
get bullets
used to
mixed
shoot
up,
bullets mixed up,
yeah,
primers. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of resources out there in YouTube, instructional videos, forums.
Gosh. It's endless.
It's endless. And one of our goals here at Spike Camp is to try to provide a place for people to learn and hopefully get experienced people, whether it's hunters or hand loaders or both, to kind of share knowledge. And one of the things we're going to do here over the course of the off season, it's probably the most accurate way to do it, is we're going to get into doing some specialized series. And one of the things I wanted to do, I have a real interest in doing this, is doing a series on hand loading and bringing guys in like you and Gary and Ed Thompson, and just I know so many guys, and so do you, that we could have some pretty educational stuff. So we're gonna get into that.
And that's the one thing about hand loading. You never stop learning, right? Like it just never seems to end. I still watch. I'll go up and watch YouTube at night when I'm, if I'm up late from work, and I'm always watching something, learning this or that, and mandrels, and just like I say, it never ends, and it's always changing. There's always something better or a different way of doing things. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, as predicted, I knew this episode would go a while. So we've just hit an hour and a half. We're going to start to wind it down, Don, but I got one more thing for you. This is not fair. And as a fellow gun nut, I absolutely apologize for doing this or putting this thought in your mind, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's not a fair question. But if you were forced to sell all of your rifles and empty the safe in exchange for an opportunity to build one gun, custom rifle, top to bottom, optics, action, barrel, stock, trigger, and I want to know the weight and the barrel length, what would this rifle be and the caliber?
Well,
I know it's heartbreaking.
No, being that you're only going to have one caliber, I'd probably go 300 PRC, right? If you're just going to stick to one cartridge, I'd probably do it with a 26-inch barrel. I'd definitely use a Defiance Action probably, and I probably would put a carbon fiber barrel on it. And if I could, I would probably use a Gunworks Climber or a Wildcat stock. Be one of those. And I'm a floor plate guy. I love. I'm not a big fan of detachable box magazines. They seem to be all the craze nowadays. So it would have. If it wasn't a Gunworks stock, in the Wildcat stock, I'd use Hawkins. Their
bottom metal.
Yeah, at the M5 bottom metal. Yeah, I really like that. It on the PRC cartridges, it gives you a little bit more space in the magazine box. You can put 3 down instead of 2 in a Magnum cartridge, so you can get 3 in your in the mag, and then 1 in the chamber, of course. So it'd be a 300 PRC, and I always like tallies. I'm a bit of a cosmetic guy when it comes to looks of a rifle. I don't really like rails on hunting rifles, right? You know, so I would be tallies, and then for a scope, it would definitely be a second focal plane scope. I just tried a first focal plane scope, and I just couldn't get used to the reticle. The size of it, you know, I don't know if it's because I'm getting a bit older and my eyes aren't as good, but it would definitely be probably a Zeiss V4 or V6 scope, 3 to 18 by 50, or the 6 to 24 by 50. If I was just gonna have one rifle, I try to keep it around the 8-pound mark.
Yep.
Be 8 pounds, 8.25 pounds. I don't think with Magnum cartridges, I think you're depending if unless you're running a break, but if it's too much under, depending on the stock design too, but if your rifle weight is too much under 8 pounds with a Magnum cartridge, and it's not braked, of course, the recoil is a bit much, for when you're trying to stay on target, right? So, but in a 300 PRC, I would probably put a brake on it, 26-inch barrel. And either a Wildcat stock or a Gunwork climber stock. That'd be the one. Yeah,
that's interesting, because it's funny, because when I did the purchase of the Gunworks climber, I kind of put that in my mind as, if I was going to buy one gun to do everything, what would it be? And the caliber I chose was the 300 PRC, and that's exactly why. So my intention for that rifle is to use it when I do an international trip. I'm going to start doing a lot more international hunts, and I just wanted a versatile caliber, and that 300 PRC is the hammer of Thor when it hits something at the other end. I mean, that's just
absolutely.
It's just such a great caliber. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
for elk hunting, it's nice to have. I've seen them absorb a couple of shots out of a 300 Weatherby, and they die, of course, but you shoot them, and it's almost like they didn't, the bullet never touched them.
they just look at it.
They just look at it. Yeah, they're just so tough. But if it wasn't a 300 PRC, it'd probably be a 7 PRC, right? And same thing. I would still go at minimum 24-inch barrel, just this way, get a bit more velocity out of it. And probably 7mm would probably be, when you get up into the higher 7mm bullets, they have better BCs than some of the 30 cal bullets. So they, overall, it'd probably be either one of those two, but more than likely a 300 PRC would be the one gun.
No, sounds like a dream rifle to me, Don. That's awesome.
Yeah, you got the dream rifle. The barrel's just a little short. That's all.
Yeah, I'm paying for that at the range, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I like that. I like the 20-inch. I don't know.
When you're out hunting, it's all, it really, it could be a 30-06, could be it really doesn't, in the end, cartridges nowadays, because it's just a personal preference. So it's really,
exactly.
They all work. I know gunsmith Gary Flack. He hunts with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and he shot moose and deer, and no issues. So,
well, there is one thing about Gary Flock that you and I can both attest to, and that boy can shoot. Flat out, frickin' shoot. He's
not only that,
unbelievable.
He's 65, and he out hikes me all the time. Like he's piggybacking me up the hill. It's pretty funny. We go hunting. He's always out. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's just a real gentleman to go hunting with. Have you had the chance to? Oh yeah. You guys did a fly-in together.
Yeah, we did a fly-in, and honestly, Gary is like one of the nicest guys. I put him in the same class as you. You guys are both just great dudes, and
and not only that, he's a hell of a cook too. First time I stayed in his cabin, hell of a cook. We had moose tenderloin from the moose he shot the previous year. I was like, holy man, I'm staying here for dinner every night. Yeah, well, he was. If I wasn't married, I would think about marrying him. He was a pretty good cook.
That's funny. That's exactly what I told him after a week of hunting with him. I said, not only is he a good cook, but it's also pretty damn handy when you take a guy with the mechanical experience of a machinist and mechanic
metallurgist,
and everything else. Oh my God.
He's got about 19
It's the-
handles. All those guys,
Exactly.
like Mitch Kendall too. He's building vehicles for himself, and he's just they're pretty great guys to know for sure. We're, like I say, pretty
They're
fortunate.
awful handy.
Yeah,
Awful handy guys.
All right, when are we doing this again?
Well, we're going to be doing it in the next few weeks. Got to get through the Wild Sheep show, and I've got a little bit of international travel, but I'll be in touch, and we'll definitely we'll start setting up get you on here a few times. We've got lots to talk about, and I knew this episode would drag on, but
for sure.
Awful fun. And first of all, Don, again, I did pull a little prank on you by bringing Kyle on and kind of tricked you a little bit, but we absolutely, the community, we absolutely love you and we love what you do. And like I said, absolute pleasure to call you my friend. And, we're super happy to have you as a member of Spike Camp, and the generosity that you're showing us as far as this donation rifle. We're going to do some magic with it. And on behalf of Spike Camp and the Wild Sheep Society and RMGA, WSF Alberta, we want to thank you for all you do. And we're going to miss you at the show, buddy. I wish you were coming.
I might be able to sneak up there for a day. We'll see. You never know. But anyway,
all right.
Thanks again for having me, and it's been a pleasure. Not to mention Kyle Stelter. You don't meet many nicer people than him either. He's a real gentleman.
He's a game changer.
Yeah,
he's a game changer.
The Wild
for
Sheep
us.
Society they're lucky to have him for sure.
Exactly. It's the one of the best moves they made was bringing him on board full time. So
yeah, you betcha. Right on. Well, thanks again, you guys. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Don. Thank you, sir.